Off the gate, I'm gonna say it. This chapter 1045 is more important than the last chapter 1044. And the devil is in the details. The sun god is in the details. And honestly, God, if you have found all this stuff on your own,
my heart, boy.
You're a massive genius. Even though it's a fighting chapter, there's so much in the details of this chapter that potentially, of course, explain so much for Luffy over the entire course of the series. First of all, if you have not seen my live stream reaction to the chapter, link in the box below to Requiem for the entire full live reaction stream, and of course on twitch.tv. And as usual for this chapter, we break it down into 3 parts. Number 1, pacing. Number 2, character. And number 3, story.
Let's do this.
Let's get right into it. Number 1, pacing. One part of focus for the entire chapter: Luffy versus Kaido. It's the showcase of what Luffy is capable of doing in Gear 5. Momonosuke and Yamato are watching from the sidelines, and we do cut over to Law and Company for a reaction, but it's just the fight. And honestly, God, this for me is a resounding, a fat, yes, YES, mega W for the pacing. I would argue that One Piece is at its best when the pacing and structure is focused on 1 to 3 or 4 parts. If we go like 6 and beyond, sometimes, actually a lot of times, it's way too much. Like for example, chapter 1041, in that chapter, there were 10 individual parts in that chapter. 10! So some of these parts are so forgettable because they're like one panel. But this chapter, it's one solitary part of focus, and then the fight itself brings along other sections, and that's it. This to me, pacing-wise, was perfect. It was perfect. Now, number 2 for the monkey massive Nika D Luffy is actually Luffy's balloon that he shows in this chapter. Inside of Kaido, of course, he's much larger than his previous versions of balloon. But the key thing here is that Luffy can actually still speak just fine when he's doing this version of balloon. Now, normally Luffy has an issue with speaking when he does balloon because the air would always leak out of his own mouth. That's why most of the time he would just do it instantly. But in this case, he's again talking and laughing just fine after doing balloon. So it appears that the expansion in this case, because there's some air in him still, of course, obviously, that's how he flies away. But it seems to be more so a Gear 3 on his belly, chest, ribs, and etc. instantly. And there's actually something in the past that we do see him do that was very similar, and it was against Moria in chapter 482, the giant jet shell. Arguably Luffy's strongest attack in the entirety of the pre-time skip, where he's in a very similar form, but it's based on Gear 3 rather than intaking air. And he's talking just fine when he's actually in that state against Moria. And this idea of Luffy's expansion and contraction is actually very similar to Tankman Luffy against Cracker, where he could actually talk just fine in Tankman, but of course Tankman was actually based on non-stop mukbanging like Nikocado style for hours upon hours. But the key thing here is after the Cracker fight, when it comes to Luffy's expansion and then contraction, because in chapter 843, Luffy, after eating all that food, he was asleep next to Nami, and over the course of time, he was naturally shrinking down and contracting his body when he was asleep. It's nothing really new when it comes to Luffy and these weird food shenanigans. Like for example, against Katakuri, he eats all the mochi, he's fat as all hell, he runs around, loses all that weight. End of story right there. But I get the feeling now that his weird food shenanigans is actually a result of Luffy's own ability.
What do you mean by that?
This is where things get funky. At the beginning of Whole Cake Island, both Luffy and Chopper were straight binging on sweets nonstop, and they both got absurdly fat. And then they both somehow lost all that weight really quickly. But compare that to Usopp, who gained a lot of weight when the Strats separated after Shimoda Archipelago, and he kept that weight on for the remainder of the time skip. And the key thing here is that both Luffy and Chopper are human fruit users. So nothing confirmed per se, because I need to go back. Like I have some sort of like expansion fetish or some kind, and I have to look at all these expanding panels of Luffy and other people in the series. But that line of thought has absolutely got me thinking. Number 3, Luffy can expand his whole body into the size of a super giant. That is a fat W for all of us who wanted the giant Luffy.
Oh yeah.
Pat yourselves on the shoulders because your IQ has ascended beyond 150 easily. And if you want to know, I did a video on last year, the best Gomu Gomu no Mi theory, and that stands to this day. But getting more to the details here, the size of Luffy exactly is hard to gauge, but the best thing to do is actually look at Kaido's size, because he uses Kaido for a jump rope. Look at Kaido in chapter 922 or 23 and compare him to the surrounding buildings. Look at Luffy's elephant gun in those chapters and then compare Kaido's head to his elephant gun. It doesn't even cover Kaido's whole head. Now look at Luffy in this giant form in 1045 and look at his sandals, his sandials. Hey yo, he is absurdly huge by comparison. It is insane. Even though he's not as large as the shadow at the end of Skypiea to personally argue, I think for sure that moment at the end of Skypiea was a hint in reference to this particular moment. But also note to the position of Luffy's legs in that pose. It's the exact same leg position as that silhouette of Sun God Nika that we first see in the Who's Who versus Jinbei fight. Number 4, this one's quite interesting here. Luffy got burned black, completely black by Kaido's blast breath, but he shrugged it off and it somehow just disappeared.
What's wrong with you?
Toon World. True. Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck stuff. Yeah, it's weird. But this might be explainable by simply Luffy's fire attribute. We haven't seen Luffy do any of the red stuff just yet, so like a red hawk or a red rock. But given the design of the Sun God Nika, it's very likely that in the future we will see him do that fire-based stuff in Gear 5. But maybe because he is the Sun God Duffer user, maybe fire-based attacks do less damage to Luffy innately than what they would normally do to other people. There was a reason why Yamato was hella worried when he took a point-blank blast breath, but the man was squeaky clean a moment later. This could be the root reason why Luffy could tank Kaido's blast breath in chapter 1002. He said guts, and that's true, but also because he's a Sun God Devil Fruit user, fire-based attacks don't necessarily work that well on him. But it could also be the usual Zoan attribute of the insane endurance and recovery speed, but souped up to a Toon Force level. Oh man. And then mind you, that natural Zoan recovery rate and endurance could explain a lot of things Luffy do that are just plain insane when it comes to recovery and endurance. Like for example, he takes the Ragnaroku in chapter 1009, but then bounces back a chapter later and pulls out Conqueror's Haki Infusion. How could he bounce back from that Ragnaroku point blank? The man is a mythical Zoan ability user. Marco was exhausted after stalling Queen and King for a while, but then after a few moments, Marco was back in business. Ulti took a sneak Thunder Bagua, and after a few minutes, was back on her feet. A lot of times, we see these Zoan ability users bounce back just like that. Mythicals, you would assume even more so. Marco and honest to God, Kaido are prima examples of this. And Luffy, low-key for the entire series, probably was too. Speaking of mythical, point number 5 for Monkey D. Luffy. Luffy just ran on the air.
I don't know.
I would like to believe that was a result of like a high-speed skywalk. But I ain't gonna lie to you. The way he just ran, like Sonic. Oh, it's very, he pulled a meep meep in mid-air. Meep meep. So It's very hard for me to actually believe that it was just like, okay, an alternate version of Skywalk. Because Skywalk is like a particular skill where like sonic booms and so on and so forth. No, he just ran on the air. But there is potentially a mythical explanation for this. Because when he does run in the air, he does make a flaming track in the sky with a vroom, with a vroom. He just goes to the sky. And the only other time we've seen Luffy do something like this, run and make flaming tracks, is in chapter 680 when he was trying to keep pace with Smoker, who was flying around. At that time, Luffy was complaining to Smoker about him flying and how him flying was cheating. How the tides have turned. Monkey and Nika D, Luffy, how the tides have turned, sir, because your whole kit is a cheat sheet. Your whole kit is broken, boy. God damn. But also, this could be an attribute of the white fire of the sun god. Meaning, just like Kaido, whose flaming clouds can uplift islands and keep him afloat, Luffy could actually be running on the fire that he makes in the air. Kaido can do it for his ability. Luffy is a uniquely specific One Piece deity. Who's to say what the sun god can and cannot do?
That's true.
Oh, that's a bit wild, but it would explain the actual fundamental nature of it all. Luffy's actually running technically on weird flaming tracks in the sky.
Crazy.
So part 6 for Luffy, so we're kind of like halfway through, just to like the Luffy section, is Luffy being in Gear 5. And it takes a lot out of him, obviously. And he briefly turns into an old man when his Gear 5 state powers down. And Kaido, in the Vismir translation, says, "Who are you?" denoting to his change in appearance, and that's different than "what are you" that the scans give you. And this might be a main drawback for Gear 5, but we won't know for sure until it's actually all said and done. There is a similar thing that happens with Chopper and his baby geezer form, after Caesar Clown extended the time of his gigantification. Keywords. And obviously, again, Chopper is a user of the Hito Hito no Mi model. And key on this too, Sengoku is also a user of a Hito Hito no Mi model, and he also can gigantify somewhat into a golden Buddha. So there is a chance that the most taxing thing that Luffy does is gigantifying parts of his body, but probably honestly his whole body, since he didn't shrink down until he needed to pull his head back through the hole, and then he powered down after he compressed back down to regular size. There's actually a complete parallel here between Chopper and Luffy. It's crazy. I never thought I'd be talking about Chopper this much, but here we are. Chopper's actually scarily important, like scarily important, when it comes to a lot of the parallels and hints that Oda has actually said in the series. And what's even more intriguing, someone told me actually during the Twitch stream, pointed out that the effects of the energy steroids are kind of similar to what happened with Luffy in this chapter. That's right, the energy steroids that are in the Tamate Bako box. The energy steroids would cause someone to gain immense power, and sometimes, if they consume those energy steroids, their hair would turn white, like Luffy's current design in all white. But the after effects are them turning old, like what happened to Luffy. So you have to wonder, okay, hold on, time out. Did the scientists of the ancient era who created the energy steroids probably, did they try and replicate the effects of the sun god Nika, and they created energy steroids as a result of that? So it's actually a very intriguing thought, and I'm gonna dive more into this for a later video topic probably. And I want to give much love to the person who actually told me this idea. I forgot if it was either a super chat or a Twitch donation, but you know who you are. I'll give you a complete formal shout out once I kind of sort through this stuff and kind of think about it, because I need to kind of think, Mark. Now, number 7 is that and this is like, if the gigantification is not the most important thing in this chapter, then this will be the number 1 thing. Luffy goes into a Gear 2 stance to reactivate his heart and the beat of liberation. I can't think of the last time we saw Luffy use a Gear 2 stance in the post-time skip, because of course he did train his skills over the time skip so he could activate his Gear 2 in specific body parts in burst and not have it used on his whole body. That was actually like a big issue from the anime to manga difference, where in the manga it's very clear that the Gear 2 only applies in one arm or one leg for the most part, but then in the anime, it's for his whole body all the damn time. It's amazing how now that detail is extremely important. So this first explains how Luffy restarted his own heartbeat in chapter 1043, when he, quote, died, end quote. At the end of that chapter, when the drum beat happens, we see steam coming out of Luffy's body and mouth. And the steam from Luffy's body usually is a sign that Gear 2 is activating in some capacity. When Luffy first does his Gear 2, in both anime and in manga chapter 387, we can see both his chest and his back kind of expand and then contract. That would indicate that his heart is working harder to use that form. Just how NL was able to massage his own heart via electricity and as a result, quote, come back to life, end quote, because Luffy had advanced so much over the course of the post-time skip with his Dufru powers, when he awakened at that instant, the same foundation that he no longer needed for Gear 2 became the new foundation for his Gear 5. That's how he can control his heart via that accelerated blood flow. It's also important to know here that we have seen other paramecia operate with internal organs. Doflamingo on his own organs, and we've seen Law in very odd and strange ways also work on other folks' organs. And Luffy is a Zoan that acts like a paramecia. And this also means, in a general sense, that the same issues that Luffy had with Gear 2 in the past, if he used Gear 2 without the proper nutrients and food in his body, then he would wind up shaving off his own lifespan if he continuously used Gear 2. As a result, Luffy's life is shorter, in theory. This is why Kaido says in the Viz, careful or you'll die, which is in the same vein as Lucci pointing out the flaws in Gear 2 Luffy back in Enies Lobby. So there is an idea that Luffy will die come the end of the series, and one of the core reasons why is because of his shorter lifespan. With this reveal, it is a safe bet that that concern for Luffy needs to not be brought up once again. So I think it works very masterfully when it comes to correlating the Enies Lobby stuff in Gear 2 with the current stuff in Gear 5. Now, number 8 for Monkey Massive, we're not done yet. We're not done yet with Luffy. Number 8 for the Monkey Massive Nika D Luffy is his ability to mold any impact he takes. That's scary. Any attack that he takes, he can now mold his body to that attack. And it's clearly an example of the souped up rubber body that the Gorosei mentioned in the last chapter, 1044. And this is a dramatic, haunting sign of his defensive capabilities increasing, and when you think about it, in conjunction with the ability to turn the ground itself into rubber, he can completely negate, at least lessen, the impact and force of any blow that comes his way, hockey or not. It doesn't matter. The man is a defensive durability endurance. I mean, calling him a tank isn't even fair. He's a god. He's a god at it. Luffy, after 3 seconds from a countdown, 3, 2, 1, beep, he kind of returns to normal. So this, I think, is the result of ultimately the nature of rubber, where normally after Luffy stretches his body, it kind of snapbacks into place. But keep in mind here that he took 2 consecutive attacks from Kaido. He molded each attack, and then he reformed. So in theory, he could continuously take attacks non-stop in Gear 5, continue to mold to these attacks, and after 3 seconds, he's back to normal. Whoa, God.
He's evil!
That's scary, man. That's busted. Ew. So this, you would think, like this whole molding feature is a new feature for Luffy that he's achieved in Gear 5. But there are some hints to this before Gear 5. And one of them is actually anime filler, so, but it is the anime filler that does allude to a giant Luffy form, and it's the one involving Lily, the giant with the mini ability, who goes inside of Luffy and reverts back into a giant, and then Luffy's whole body kind of like molds around her body. So Luffy does kind of mold there in the filler, and again, it is filler, but giant Luffy in that filler, here we are now, 1045, giant Luffy exists. The second thing is based on an actual major aspect of the souped up rubber body that actually is just as scary, because Luffy is molding to not just any attack, it's Kaido's club attack, which consists of blunt and piercing attacks. This means as a result of Luffy's now souped up rubber body, he has now completely negated a major counter to his abilities, slashing and piercing attacks. Think about how he had to avoid, in earnest, so many times, Katakuri's mold spear. Why? Because the thrusting penetration power of the mold spear was absolutely disgusting. But Luffy in Gear 5 could probably take a mold spear point blank and just mold to it. That's scary. And this is where we have another example come out when it comes to a molding hint for Luffy before Gear 5. Because during that same fight, the Katakuri fight, in chapter 895, after Katakuri dodges the Black Mamba, he actually knees Luffy in the face with a spike on his leg. But Luffy's face wasn't punctured with a hole. He took the damage and seemingly had no hockey on his face. But Luffy's face did kind of morph a little bit, or take in Katakuri's spike. That is a very devastating, piercing blow, but Luffy took it all the same. During that fight, that was probably a sign of his rubber body getting stronger, to indicate even further that his body was getting stronger in terms of rubber during the Katakuri fight is in Luffy's next fight in Wano Country, his first fight in Wano Country against who?
What?
Urashima. Luffy is able to expand his own body without the need of air. Do you see where this is going? Oh, dude. This is deep.
Damn right.
Because these things are really coming to the forefront, arguably now, in a big way for Gear 5, and all makes sense. Number 9 is very simply put, the features of Monkey Nika D. Luffy, where we now know that he has an all-white design. Because he is the sun god, the idea of the color, I think, is based off of the sun when it's viewed from space, which is essentially white. And there is a moment when Kaido does slam down Luffy's head, like literally fold this man, and we see a black pitch on top of his head. This could be shading, or it could have some meaning behind it. It is hard to tell, honest to God, whether or not that black spot means anything of substance, but in the future we'll clearly find out. Now number 10 for Luffy is, oh man, this chapter, yo. Outside of the enhanced durability that Luffy has, which is clearly absurd, it's nuts, Luffy once again shows insane strength and speed. Luffy is literally skipping Kaido in dragon form. That is an absolutely absurd strength feat, considering just how large Kaido is. Even though technically he's free falling, not really jumping, but that's just, I guess, semantics, all right? The strength feat applies all the same. And honest to God, at this point in time, I think this is the best strength feat in the verse of One Piece. Yes, I think jump rope skipping Kaido is the best strength feat in all of One Piece.
No shit.
And then, when it comes to a speed feat, Luffy running on the air, maybe even the fire of the Nika God, Luffy covers an absurd amount of distance. Remember, Onigashima is filled with superstructures. When they first arrive on Onigashima, look how small the Sun Ego and Kid Ship and Dero ships are compared to the statues, let alone the umbrella and so on and so forth. We know for a fact at least that when it comes to overall circumference, it can actually fit inside of the flower capital. Luffy, when he runs in the air, is able to cover the distance of at least an island or two, minimum, in a matter of seconds. Speed is dumb. Speed is dumb. Finally, number 11. That's right, number 11. Luffy is using Armor Haki and Conqueror's Haki while fighting, even though we don't see any gaps in the air during impacts or hardening on his skin. Now, maybe in the last page where we see Kaido on his back, there's hardening on Luffy's fist, but because of the leg that we see and it's shaded the same way and there's no luster and that kind of stuff, I have to assume it's just that, shading. We do see black sparks though on Luffy's final attack, which does indicate that Haki is being used, for sure. From what I've gathered, it seems like Luffy might be using Conqueror's Haki and Armor Haki on his whole body for a universal attack power increase and also defensive buffs as well. The scans, I think, allude to this more than the Viz does, because in the scanlations, Kaido uses the word coating when he talks about Armor Haki and Conqueror's Haki. We've only seen Luffy transform twice into Gear 5 so far, and each time there was black lightning effects signifying Haki. Some of Kaido's men also got knocked out in the previous chapter, proving that Conqueror's Haki is also being used. This could also explain why we don't actually see the gaps in air for a Conqueror's Haki punch or hardening, because Luffy is using it universal on his whole body. He's not focused on the flow. What did Hyogoro teach this man? The flow of Haki. But if Luffy is doing it as like a universal buffer on his whole body, there is no flow. No luxurious locks in the wind. No flow at all. That's why we don't see it. He's just having a blast with his new powers and isn't in the right mindset to use Haki properly. This could also be another drawback from the Gear 5 state, because every time his heart beats in that fashion, the man's like on a crazy high. And this, ooh, here we go. What Luffy is doing right now could also be the deal with Kaido and Big Mom themselves during the rooftop fight. Because Law in chapter 1009 said that he couldn't move Big Mom or Kaido in his room because of their Haki levels. And it was unclear if it was Armor Haki or Conqueror's Haki, especially when we saw them fighting and Big Mom for damn sure didn't show any hardening or any Conqueror's Haki for that matter. It was just all invisible for the most part. That invisibility of Haki, but still at such an absurdly high level of Haki, is exactly what Luffy is doing right now. It's safe to say, at this point in time, at least in Gear 5, exudes so much Haki that he cannot be moved in Law's room. And I think this is also a sign of just how good his affinity for Conqueror's Haki truly is. In this arc of Wano Country, we have seen Luffy use that ability when he's unconscious. Chapter 1010, Conqueror's Haki infusion. And then now, it's so powerful, potentially, he's coating his whole body and damn thing for even added extra buffs of attack power and defense. Compare that to Yamato or to Zoro. Zoro in the King of Hell state can only use Conqueror's Haki with Enma conjunction for like barely a few minutes. Dude, no. Over the top! Luffy is insane.
That's true.
Yeah, we are finally done now with the Luffy section of this video. Do you understand now just how important a lot of this stuff for this chapter is for Luffy and his character? Do you understand now why I said in this chapter how important this chapter was compared to the last chapter? I argue it's even more important because it explains so many details. How many of these past details were influenced when it comes to Luffy's power scheme, knowing what we know now? And I'd argue there's a metric ton. There is a metric ton that Oda just gave us. My God. And then finally, the last proper character is Kaido. So number one with Kaido. Kaido is clearly familiar with Devil Fruit Awakenings. Enough so to know what a paramecia, which for some reason the Viz say paramythia, which I I don't know why they did that in the viz. That was really, really strange. But once again, Kaido is familiar with Paramecia, Awakenings, and probably Zoans as well, because he comments on both Paramecia and Zoan stuff when Luffy transforms. This might allude to Kaido having another form. Could you? Kaido has another form, and that other form would be his awakening. Number 2, Kaido displays the biggest blast breath we have seen in the series so far, by far. It is dumb huge. Dumb huge. It's specifically at the bottom of page 10. This thing looks so freaking huge, my man. It would cover the entirety of the top side of Onigashima that is completely filled with super structures. No. So Kaido continues to play fantastical feats even in face of God mode Luffy. Maybe that's the reason why both Kaido and Luffy have the same eyebrow swirls, because one is a sun god, another is a dragon god. They can tussle. Clearly. The next part for Kaido, number 3. Kaido, even though I say all that great stuff about Kaido, he does stumble in this chapter, showing signs of fatigue and damage from all the fighting he's done for the entire arc, obviously. So it looks like what Yamato has been saying before about Kaido taking damage and hurting, like in chapter 1043, or when she noticed that the flame clouds were failing to support Onigashima, it looks like Yamato was 100% spot on. Kaido is really getting fatigued and gassed, but he's been fighting a lot. And that's it for character. That's it for character. Now let's get into the last section of the chapter review, story. And with this chapter, it's actually pretty damn simple, thank God. Number 1, the next stage of Luffy vs. Kaido is in full swing, and clearly it's a good day for a swell battle.
Good day for a swell battle.
Now number 2, because Momonosuke and Yamato are watching, they are in prime position to assist if needed. Keep in mind that Onigashima isn't being pushed and is either floating in that same spot in the air or is en route back to the Flower Capital. Probably, honestly. And we have not seen Momo in human form. I think that Kaido must see Momo in human form. Number 3, simply put, Momonosuke notes to Luffy's voice dying out. So Luffy cannot maintain his pace of fighting for a long time and will probably be in severe critical condition after it's all said and done, which once again does give merit to the Hawkins prophecy, clearly. So that's a story. Simple, straightforward, but honest to God, very effective. I think it was pretty damn good stuff. So, thoughts. I love the Looney Tune antics of Luffy and how he has used his awakening to affect the area and Kaido's body. It is insane. The last panel did take some time for your boy to kind of sort out, but when I realized that he was actually punching Kaido, like kind of not through his face, but like he rubberfied Kaido's face, dented the entire thing in, and his skin pops out from the back. That was, yo. That last panel, that was wild. Because you really thought that, yo, this man just punched through Kaido's skull. That is one of the wildest things I've ever seen in One Piece, of no cap. And also, the line about Pedro. Ultimately, I think refers to Luffy pushing himself to the brink of death to beat Kaido. Given Luffy's mental state of joy, I doubt that he could use, effectively, observation haki, honestly. And then afterwards, the line of Bing Sake that the scans note to is even more evidence of Oda's foreshadowing and the importance of that song for potentially the entire series of One Piece. So that, it's actually more of a story component too, but I put it in the thoughts. But honestly, you know what? That should belong in story. You know what? Fine, I'll put it in story. Why not? Done. So, all in all, this chapter rating is a 10 out of 10. A 10 out of 10 chapter. I think that this chapter was absolutely better than last chapter. Last chapter I said, okay, it was more like a 9.5, okay? The reveal of Luffy's true ability in the last chapter was extremely important, of course. But in this chapter, when we look at these details of how his powers actually work, what we get here is the potential clearing up of a lot of different aspects of Luffy's power spectrum that we have been experiencing over the entirety of the series. And these details being cleared up, at least potentially, in this one chapter is extraordinarily pivotal. So even though the story progression for the last chapter was absolutely superior than this chapter, I would argue is slightly better for character, and without a doubt, the pacing of this chapter is way better than the last chapter. I think this is definitively a 10 chapter. This is the second chapter in this whole arc I will give a 10, a flat out 10. Only 2 chapters so far in this arc have a 10. Number 1, ultimate chapter, Yonko reveals. Number 2, 1045 next level. Correct. Okay? No break. Thank the sun god.